So what we're going to be talking about today is just a general orientation into TouchStone and some of its basic functionality. And then we're going to specifically focus on the 4 key functions. So these training sessions will go by topics. This is the first one, starting with the 4 key functions, and then we go into all the other areas throughout TouchStone and end with the dashboard, which is what you're looking at now. These training sessions will get emailed to you. It usually takes about, I think it's like 24 hours probably for it to happen, because some editing goes on of it, and then it'll be emailed out. So if you miss a session or you listen to a session and you want your employees or anyone else to be able to view that session, then you will get emailed a recording. So another thing I'm going to be doing today at the end is I'm going to highlight our new release. So we're having a new release of TouchStone, which is hopefully happening over the weekend. We had a bit of a delay with it just because our offices are in Sonoma County, which is in Northern California, and this is the area where all of the fires happened 2 years ago, and we're under extreme fire danger warnings now, and the power company has shut off hundreds of thousands of people's power, including our office. So there's a bit of scrambling going on with trying to get computers to work and things like that. But having said all that, I think that the new release most likely will be, if not this weekend, early next week, and you'll all be getting an email related to it. So I'm going to be just highlighting the new release. It has to do mostly with the graphical interface inside of TouchStone. So this dashboard screen looks a little different than the org chart and the 4 functions and the job descriptions. So with the new release, we're going to be moving that new user interface all throughout TouchStone. So I'll highlight and show you what that looks like. So this is the TouchStone dashboard, and this is the first thing that you'll see when you log into TouchStone. If you have control panels set up, then you'll see your control panel right here listed. If this area is blank for you, it means that you do not have a control panel set up. If you're a manager and you have a control panel for a managerial position like this one, then you're going to see this area here called Management Review. Also on the dashboard, you'll be able to see the public processes, which are here. So the purpose of the dashboard is to give employees access to their processes and allow them to use them. Use them to review what they're supposed to be doing, complete things inside of them like checklists and forms, or to use them for training. So this dashboard gives employees access. That's the primary purpose of it. It also gives managers the ability to track and see what their employees are doing in this area called Management Review. So there's going to be a lot more said about the dashboard as we go through these training sessions, and then at the end, the last training session will be specifically focused on this. But just know at this point that that's the purpose of the dashboard, to give access to processes. If you haven't set up control panels for your account yet, some of you are new to TouchStone, some of you have had it for a long time, this is something I'd highly recommend. Create control panels and create usernames and passwords for all of your employees. In the upper right-hand corner of the screen right here, everyone sees this button called Resource Center. So this is a help desk inside of TouchStone. And if you haven't been here yet, this is a great place to come. If you have questions about using TouchStone, if you just want some inspiration on what to do inside of it, where to start. If you have a question about terminology, there's the knowledge library right here. This whole resource center has been updated for the new release. Currently, when you go to it, it's going to be the same as it always has been. But when the new release happens, when you come here, it's going to look the same. The icons will look the same. But when you go to the user guides or to the webinars or the getting started videos, it's all going to be updated with the new user interface. And so if you have any questions about the using of the new version of TouchStone, then this is where you could come to find that. In the support area right here, Support Plus, this is a great place to come if you've got a question related to TouchStone. So you can go contact support right here, and then right here in the support form, send in your question and it'll get answered, sometimes right away, sometimes if according to time zones, it might be the next morning, but this is a great place to come. If you have a problem or a feature request, this is a great place to go. Click here to report a problem or a feature request. That's something you'd like TouchStone to do that it doesn't do now. Also under the Support Plus, you're all registered for the live technical training series already, but if you want to come to TouchStone University, this is where you could go to set up or to view the upcoming classes. I'm just going to highlight this real quick. So the upcoming classes are all listed here. And what we do is in this series, we're talking about the top 5 managerial processes to use and implement in TouchStone. So this is a new format for TouchStone University. I think it's pretty cool. It's going to be a great set of sessions. It's a shorter amount of time. They're only half an hour each. But in this training session, we're going to talk about the top 5 things that managers need to do in order to be effective, and how to do that in TouchStone. So again, if you're interested in any of that, you can just click on that Support Plus tab and register for those sessions for free. All right, so that's the Resource Center. To the right of the Resource Center, this little person icon is your user settings and logout. So user settings takes you to the screen where you can see your username and password, which you're logged into TouchStone with. If you want to edit or change that, this is the place to go to do that. You can change your username or your email address that you're logged in as, and also change your password. The log out button lets you log out. I think it's always good internet protocol to go and log out of something when you're done with it for the day. TouchStone will stay active for, I think it's 3 hours with inactivity. So without doing anything in it, it's going to time out in 3 hours and log you out. But if you use it and click within those 3 hours, then the 3 hours starts back over again. When you're done at the end of the day, again, it's always a good idea to log out. It's just good internet practice, not just with TouchStone, but with any web tool. To the right of the person icon gives you access to account administration. If you don't see this little wheel icon here, it's just because you're not an administrator. But if you do, then this is where you can go to user accounts, account settings, or upgrade account. If I click here, it takes me just to the administration area, the account administration area. Here's where you set up users. So when we were talking about the dashboard in the beginning and creating users and assigning control panels, this is where all of this happens in account administration. So I'm just going to go back to the dashboard here. On the the left-hand side of TouchStone, you see the navigation area. So through this navigation, it allows you to access the 4 key functions, access the organization chart, go to reports. Reports runs reports of what happens on the control panel. So here in the control panel area, if I'm going in and completing things in my control panel, I can run a report of those things I've completed. If Mary here is doing things in her control panel for training purposes or for things I've told her to do, I can then go run a report and see what she's done. So that's the reports feature, and then the search icon is also available here in this left-hand navigation. So let's go to the 4 key functions. I'm just going to click Guiding the Business. So now I'm inside of the 4 key functions. And I'm just going to flip back to this Overview tab just so you can see it all together. So let's start talking about the 4 key functions, which is the main purpose of this training session. So what the 4 key functions is it's the place where all of your processes are listed and organized. So as we define it, guiding the business right here is for strategic and managerial processes. So processes you use to guide the business. Getting is for marketing, strategy, advertising, and sales. So getting new business. Doing is your operations. So the delivering of your products or services. And then running is the office processes. So it's administration, finance, human resources, information technology, computer, software processes. So this is how we define them: guiding, getting, doing, running. You can edit these function titles if you don't like the getting, doing, guiding, running terminology. So inside of each of these 4 buckets, we then create processes. I'm going to click on guiding the business right here. So now we're inside of guiding the business. And the first thing you want to notice are these little black headers here. These are called subfunctions. So the subfunctions help to organize the processes into categories. That's the purpose of the subfunctions. So first thing, if you want to edit the function titles, so you don't like the guiding, doing, getting, running, you just click this little black edit pencil, and then up comes that function title, and you just highlight this, hit delete, and then retype what you want. I'm not going to do that, but it's pretty straightforward. Highlight, delete, and type in what you want. So that would edit the function title. One thing to think about in editing function titles is you only have 4 buckets here, 4 key functions. So if I called this sales and then I called this advertising, well, I'm going to run out of functions. So try to keep it in the same general subject areas, but obviously you can see you can change from the getting, doing, guiding, running if you choose. Right next or above this edit pencil, there's a toolbar item here called subfunctions. So this is how I control the subfunctions. I can add a subfunction right here. I just click add, and then I'd put in the name of my subfunction. And then I just hit save. And then you'll see the new subfunction title down here. So really easy to add subfunctions. The purpose of the subfunctions is to help you organize your processes. So that's the purpose. So it creates categories of work. Under here, I could also edit the existing subfunction titles. Just choose edit, click the subfunction that I want to change, and type in the new title here in the to field. Pretty straightforward. You can also delete subfunctions, and then you can reorder them. In the new version of TouchStone, reorder is drag and drop, but in this version, which is going to change here in a few days, it's just up and down to adjust the order. So you can see some subfunction examples here in my guiding the business. So this one says board meetings, and then I've got processes here related to the board of directors and the things that the board does. This one's called employee management. So I've got processes here related to managing employees, company-wide, all employees. Then I've got one here called strategy. So these are the strategic business processes. So very high-level processes like developing a strategic plan and evaluating things. Then I've got a subfunction here called training. And then I've got my training processes. Sometimes these two are combined, employee management and training. You could have just one subfunction with all those processes within it. Everything is just drag and drop here. So I can drag from one to the other. The new version of TouchStone is going to be the same thing, drag and drop. So these are some common subfunctions within guiding the business. Let's go to getting the business next. So I'm just clicking here on this box to go to getting the business. So now inside of getting the business, here are some other common subfunctions for all industries. Advertising or lead generation. That's a typical subfunction or category of work within guiding the business. So all the processes for how you generate leads. Then we have sales. So these are your processes for converting those leads. And we have marketing strategy. These are strategic processes So higher level, they're developing the marketing plan and analyzing the market area. And then sales management down here. So these are processes specifically related to managing the sales department. So you could have more different sub-functions, but these are just some common ones that I think are pretty relevant for every industry. Now let's go to running the business. I'm just clicking running, and now I'm in running. And I know I'm in running because I can see it right up here. And also it's not available here in these three buckets. So here in running, here are some common sub-functions. Finance, every business needs finance. Sometimes I see this called bookkeeping. That's fine, it's just a different term for the same thing. Financial management is like higher level finance things, like cash flow planning, budgeting, profit sharing, things like that. You could combine these two and have all the finance things just under one sub-function. Administration, that's another common sub-function within running the business. The admin processes. Most businesses need some amount of administrative processes. Information technology, this is a good one. So this is all of your computer how-to processes, how to use your software, software management, inventory of your computers and your software. And then human resources is a must for any business that has employees. Even if you just have subcontractors, there's a certain amount of human resource processes that are still really important for businesses that don't have employees and just subcontract everything. Now you could have more sub-functions here, just like the other sub-functions, but again, these are the ones that I commonly see. In some industries, you might have a compliance or a legal sub-function, or safety. If you're really dealing with a lot of safety issues, you could have a sub-function for that. Now let's go to doing the business. So here's where it gets industry specific. So depending on what you do, what your business does, that's going to dictate what these sub-functions are. So if you're in a service business, then your sub-functions are going to be service related, like maybe this one down here. If you're in a construction business or a manufacturing, well then your sub-functions should be related to those services, those things that you're producing. So here's some just example sub-functions, like if for a service business, client service or customer service. This is, I would see this in most businesses, so some amount of processes that are just related to delivering those services to the customers or what to do when someone's unhappy with the service. Production or operations management or service management or retail management, this is also a good one. If you deal with materials or equipment or inventory, material control or inventory control, you have a warehouse and warehouse. So think about what it is your business offers and what is the what are categories of work within your operations or your production area. So once you've got your sub-function set and identified, this is how you add processes. So I go add new process, and then I'm going to type in the name of the process, and then I tell TouchStone which sub-function I want it in, and then I hit save. So easy as that. So now I have a new process here. This process I just added is red because there's nothing in it. You look at the legend right here, it says not started. There's nothing in it, it's just a title. What that means is when I select it, and then I look over here at the process tools, there's nothing here. So I just added this process title, and I have not started it yet. I haven't documented anything. Once a process has been started, so there's some documentation in it, then TouchStone will turn it blue, like this process. So I'll show you an example of that. If I click this one we just added, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to start to build a work plan for this process. Then I put in my work plan title, and then I hit create. Now I've got a work plan, so I could start to document this. I could build a step-by-step for how this work is done. Now TouchStone knows there's something in it, so it's turned it blue. So that happens automatically. The system, TouchStone does that for you. It will turn it blue, and that lets you know there's something in it. It's in progress, so it's been started. When I'm finished with the documentation, I flip this little flag that says process documentation completed. I do this manually. And now when I go back to the 4 functions, you're going to see it's black with a little check mark. So that's what the color coding is about. Red, there's nothing in it like this one. Blue, there's something in it, but it's not done yet. And then black, it's done. In the color coding, you'll also notice that there's these little green check marks or the P. What that indicates is that a process has been put in the public folder. So if we look over here at the dashboard, there are a series of processes right here that I've put in that I have put in what's called the public folder. So public means that the processes are available to everyone, as opposed to the processes just being the accountability of 1 or 2 positions on the org chart. So I can assign processes to positions on the org chart over here, which creates the job description for that position and makes that process the accountability of that position and person. Public processes are different than that. They're company-wide information. They're processes that everybody needs to have access to and everyone needs to use. So some typical public processes are going to be HR things like the employee handbook, management philosophy, how to request a vacation, emergencies. And then they're also going to be sometimes computer things like CRM how-tos, how to use the company's software and software tools. They can be managerial things like classes and workshops if you have in-service trainings and you want to upload the information that people learned so that they can access it later, or time management. So when a process has been made public, it's then put in the public folder. And the way you do that is you select the process, like this one, safety, and then you fill in this box next to, in the details screen. And now TouchStone's put this in the public folder. And if we go back to the 4 key functions here, you're going to see now, since this one's been marked as complete, it's also got this little green check mark to it. And then it's been put into, on the dashboard, into the public folder. So that's what the P's mean. And I'll talk in later technical sessions, I'll talk more about the public process area, but that's what these little color codes mean. All of the processes are drag and drop. So once you add a process, you can move it around the 4 functions pretty easily just by dragging and dropping here. Another way to get processes into your system, as opposed to going, in addition to going here, add new process, is to go and look in the libraries. So most of you just have the general process library assigned to you. Some of you who are a part of our referral, part of one of our referral networks may have other libraries here that you see, but all of you will have the general process library. Inside the 4 key functions, there are 4 libraries. There's one for guiding, there's one for getting, there's one for doing, and there's one for running. So if you want to access one of the libraries, you click the function that you want to see the library inside of. So running the business. If I go add from process library and I click general processes here, now I'm seeing all the processes within this library. And all of these processes are related to running the business. So they're finance, administration, human resource, IT processes, everything related to running the business. So here inside the library, if you see processes that are grayed out like this one, it's because they already exist in your system. So this has already been added to my 4 key functions. The ones that are blue, you can add. So if you've already added processes, then clearly you'll see those inside of your 4 key functions list, and you'll also see that they're grayed out. So the benefit of these library processes is it kind of gives you a head start in some cases. So I can look at any of these that I'm interested in, and if I want to add them, I fill in the box next to the title here, and then I tell TouchStone which sub-function I want to put them in, or put that process in, and then I just hit save. Now when I save this, it's downloading or it's copying this process from the library and putting it into my account. It's right down here. Let's drag it up to the top so you can see it. So this is the one I just added from the library. So if you haven't added any library processes, I think a good way to do it is to go to the library, hit General, look at the sub-function that's at the top. So this is Finance. So then I would go through and add all of the finance processes that I'm interested in. So accounts receivable, credit, deposits. And then when I'm happy with the finance processes that I want, then I hit Save. And now TouchStone will download those processes into the finance sub-function. They're all right here. And then go back, add from process library general, then flip the flag to the next sub-function, human resources, and then add the human resource processes. I think it's a better way than just going select all and adding them to one, or going through and picking the ones you want and having them all added to one. I mean, clearly you can drag and drop and move things around, but it's just a more methodical way of doing it. If you are one of those people who has gone to the process library and hit select all and just hit save, I would highly suggest that you look through all those processes and decide which ones you actually want to keep. So what I mean is look at them like this one that we just added, and you click it, and then you look over to the left here, and you see what's in it. So these are a series of employee satisfaction surveys. So look through them and ask yourself, is this something you're going to use? Is this something that you would edit and use? So that's the first question. If the answer is yes to that, good. And then the second question you want to ask yourself is, are you going to edit and use this in the next 6 months? If the answer to that is yes, then keep it. It's a good process for you. Eventually, you want to go in and customize it and kind of make it your own. But if the answer is no to that you're not going to use it in the next 6 months, and what I mean is edit it, make it your own, customize it, and implement it, get people to use it, then take that process and delete it. Drag it to the delete folder and hit delete. This is not a big deal because I just deleted this because I'm not going to use it in the next 6 months. It's a great idea. I'd love to do it someday, but there are a lot of other priorities going on right now. So I deleted it. 6 months from now, if I go back, add from process library, it's magically there again. So it just puts it back in the library. It's right here. So don't be afraid to go through and clean up any library processes that you've downloaded. It's better you do that, because if you add everything, it's just going to be overwhelming. You just see so many library processes, and it's like, wow, this is like overwhelming enough. You don't want a bunch of stuff in your account that you're not committed to using right away. So that's the library. Remember, you can also go to the other of the 4 key functions. Like here, now I'm going to getting. And when I go add from process library here, and I go general processes, well now, here's all those library processes. So these things are all related to sales and marketing. So remember to look inside of each library. You see a process you want, click it, make sure it goes into the right sub-function if you have that as an option, and then just hit save. So someone's asking a good question about sub-functions. I'm just going to paraphrase this. Their question is, are they going to see their own sub-functions? So yes, that is, you're looking at my demo account right now. And if I'm misunderstanding this, just correct me. But we're in my demo account right now, the TouchStone training account. And these are the sub-functions I've created. You're going to see your own sub-functions here. And when you go add from process library, general processes, and you hit this drop down, These are going to be your sub-functions, the ones that you've added. So you're not going to see these general categories. You're going to see your own. If also add new process, you're going to see your own sub-functions here all throughout TouchStone. If you ever go to add a new process or pull from the library and you look at your sub-functions and you're like, well, there's not a good category for this, then add the sub-function. Go here and add the sub-functions that you want. These suggested sub-functions are all in the Resource Center, by the way. So you could go to the user guides area and go to sub-functions on the list there, and it gives you these ideas for sub-functions that I gave you as we were talking about sub-functions. So if you're struggling with that, then remember to go to the Resource Center. If you're struggling for sub-function titles and you're doing the business function, because remember these are based on industry, then send a message through the help desk and just say, do you have any suggestions for a retail company or for a manufacturing company? And we've seen any and every type of TouchStone account, so we'll send you back some ideas. Okay, so let's talk about, oh, actually, one more thing. This right here is our export arrow. And you're going to see this all throughout TouchStone, but it basically allows you to export or print. Nowadays, most browsers will, Chrome especially, which is the best browser to be using with TouchStone, allows you to print PDFs from, if you go inside of your computer settings and choose export to PDF, you can do that automatically through a lot of browsers, but this is the export arrow. So let's talk a little bit about strategies around coming up with process titles. So this is always something that isn't an exact science and is sometimes difficult for people. So let's start from the beginning. The 4 key functions is a hierarchy. So I've got the 4 uppermost functions, the 4 key areas of any business. So you can lay this over the top of your business and you can see the work that needs to happen in these 4 categories. And visualizing this and seeing it in TouchStone is really beneficial when you're talking about building a business. A lot of business owners get really mired in the details about everything that's happening and who's doing what. This area, the 4 key functions, allows you to view your business from an entrepreneurial point of view. It's like you're looking at it from above and you're seeing the landscape below, like when you're an airplane and you're looking down at the land below. So this helps you look at it, see it with this lens. So these are the hierarchy, the 4 key areas. When I drill down into one of the functions, then I see the next layer, which are the sub-functions like finance and human resources. Then I see the processes, which is the next level of the hierarchy. So 4 key functions, sub-functions, process. Then I see, if I click the process, the bottom level of the hierarchy, which are the process tools. So we're now in accounts payable, and within accounts payable, I have all of these different things that happen, all these activities. So 4 key functions, drill down to sub-functions, sub-area, drill down to process, and then ultimately drill down to tools within that process. So that's the hierarchy. The problem occurs when you haven't defined that hierarchy well enough. So, by the way, this is another way to see the hierarchy. We're 4 key functions, running the business, that's the highest level. Finance, sub-function, next level. Process, accounts payable, next level. And then tools is the bottom level. So this breadcrumb trail, we call it, allows you to see the hierarchy as well. So the problem happens when you don't define these well enough. So the 4 key functions is already defined for you. Sub-functions, we try to help you define that by giving you ideas, which again you'll find in the Resource Center. But here inside of running the business, finance, that's a good sub-function level because it's not a process. Finance itself is not a process. You can imagine if we had a finance process and we had to document everything within that process that was related to finance, well, that process would just be way too enormous. You'd basically have a process title that said finance, and within it you'd have probably 20 different work plans and 50 different forms, and that's too much going on inside of a process. So that's what I mean by it has to be higher level. I saw in an account the other day where they had a process called sales. Well, and then it had a process called advertising. Well, that's a good example of not being high level enough with the sub-function titles and being too broad with the process titles. So think high level with the finance, think category of work, and then think process. So another thing you can ask yourself is purchasing a process? Does it have a beginning and an end and a clear set of steps or tasks within it? If the answer is yes, then it's a process. Finance, if I ask myself, is finance a process? Does it have a clear beginning and an end and clear steps and tasks within it? Well, no, it's way broader than that. There's way more going on within it. So here's where it gets a little like an art and less like a science. Within a process, you can have multiple work plans. So this process, accounts payable, this is an example of when there are multiple things going on within a process. So within accounts payable, we're seeing work plans here for every action workflow that occurs related to accounts payable. So here I've got tasks laid out for how to do check deposits. Here's how to do bank deposits. This would be how to create invoices, special invoices, check payments. So each one of these work plans has its own step-by-step. So given that, who's to say that check deposits couldn't be a process all on its own? Well, it could. So here's where your own discretion comes into play. You could decide to make a process accounts payable and then have all these work plans within it, or you could have decided to make each of these its own process. So there's nothing wrong either way with those two examples, but I'm going to give you some suggestions or reasons why to do it one way or another. So here's one reason why combining things that are similar in nature is better. So accounts payable, combining everything within this, all these work plans together within this process title called accounts payable, this is beneficial because, number one, if one person does all this work, well, they see everything related to accounts payable within it. Easy to access. I know it's all here. There's another benefit to having less process titles. So if I were to make all of these processes, well, now I have 6 more processes on my 4 key functions than I had before. And that just has to do with the amount of things. The more things you have, more processes you have, some people might feel like it's a little more overwhelming than it needs to be. If you combine things, then you have it all under one header, which makes it easier to find and to deal with those things. This is kind of a preference. And again, here's where it becomes up to you to decide how you like to see things the best. Inside of TouchStone, processes are linked to job descriptions. So that's why this idea of if all of this is done by one position, how sometimes it's better to have it all under one overall header called accounts payable. So this process, accounts payable, is linked to a box on the org chart, which assigns the accountability for accounts payable to one position or 2 positions, depending on who does it. So you can't take a work plan and assign that work plan to a job description. You assign the whole process. So here's a reason why another thing to think about, or a reason why you wouldn't want to combine them all. If I have one position who does these 3 things, check deposits, bank deposits, invoices, and then I have another position who does these 3 things, well, then that might be a reason to break these apart and have deposits be a process, and then maybe payables with these 3 things in it, or invoicing with these 2 in it, another process. So think about that, how it's assigned to boxes on the org chart. If there are things within it that are confidential, so one person shouldn't be seeing what the other person is doing, well, clearly that's a reason to break them apart. So if you have issues with this, I mean, give us a call, send a message to the Help Center, and someone will jump on the phone with you and help you with it. Because there are kind of reasons to do it one way or another. Some of it is subjective. It's just how you like to see it. But if you want us to go through all that with you, then we're happy to help you organize it. My personal opinion is I like to see more inside of each process and less process titles. So when I go to onboarding, say, or interviewing, I want to see everything related to how we interview employees in here. I want to see everything related to how we onboard employees in here. And when I click this onboarding, I can see the preparing, I can see the first day of training. I don't want these to be separate titles because I want to know I can come here and find it all, everything related to onboarding. Okay, one more thing, and then I'm going to highlight the new release for everyone. When you're naming processes, so this is some strategies around naming processes, decide on a protocol for that, for the actual title itself. So you'll notice with my processes, I have the first letter capitalized of every word: financial statement preparation, profit sharing plan. This is just a normal naming convention where you have the first letter of every word capitalized. I see in some accounts where people like all caps, and then other people don't do any caps, and what's annoying about that is everything looks different, and some people don't mind that, but to me it just looks sloppy. So decide on what your naming convention is. This technique is a good one because that's what people normally do. That's why it's called a naming convention. Normally they would think of a title as the first letter of every word is capitalized. The additional problem with not doing it this way is when you go add processes from the library, well, we're using normal naming conventions here. And so when you add these processes, if you've done all caps for your other processes, well, then now you're in that situation where things look different. So think about that. Another thing to think about with naming is come up with titles. So title convention is short, specific titles. It's not a phrase or a sentence which describes how to do what that is. It's a short, specific title, naming it. This is also a good exercise to get good at when you're learning about creating processes in a business or a process-dependent business. You want to struggle to name things. So we think of work that goes on just as work. Well, that just gets done. When you struggle to name it, you're actually making it objective for the first time in some cases. So you're not just saying, well, we make sales or we hire people. You're saying this is the hiring process. This is the sales process. We don't just get leads on the internet. This is the SEO process or the pay-per-click process. So name things with short, specific titles. If you want to further describe it, right here underneath the title, this is where that is created, or where you put it into TouchStone. Create, implement, and train the company's safety codes and procedures. So right inside this field, right under the title of the process, is where you put the objective. So sometimes what I see in accounts is I'll see people who have done this. So they've created a process title, add new process, and this is what they call it. It's a sentence or a phrase. It looks like this. This is not a good title. this is the objective, the purpose. This has adjectives in it, and it's not clear and specific. When I'm looking at this title, if I read it, it may well indeed tell me what this is supposed to be, but my eye can't scan through it. I can't just go deposits, credit. Oh, I know what that is. I have to read this, and it takes longer for your brain to digest it. That becomes a problem when you're linking things to job descriptions and you're training people. It just looks, it makes it harder for them to learn what this is. So if anybody has started to name processes like this, then fix it. So click that process, go to the title, cut the sentence out, name this what it is, safety, save that, go here, and then paste that and make it the objective. So now we just fixed it pretty easily. This is good work. You know, don't delete this forever. Make it the objective if it makes sense as the objective. One last thing about titles. Try to put the subject first and the verb or the adjective second. So this says cash flow planning. It doesn't say planning cash flow. This says budget creation. It doesn't say creating a budget. So put the subject first and the verb or the adjective second. If anything is starting with creating, planning, do this, change it with the subjects first. So the reason for that is when you're searching for something, you're using the search in TouchStone, or you're just thinking about it, you're going to think of the subject first. I'm not going to think of creating. I'm going to think budget. Where's the budget process? I'm not going to think creating. Another thing is if you're hyperlinking, which is something we'll get into in another webinar, when you hit the hyperlink drop-down, it's going to show you the first two letters. And if you started it with creating, producing, developing, that's what you're going to see. And then you'll see, and it'll be in alphabetical order that way. You're going to see budget or cash flow, but you see that adjective first in an alphabetical order, and it's going to be harder to find things. All right, any questions about any of that? So someone's asking about duplicate processes. So let me answer this real quick, and then we'll still have time for the new release training. I'm trying to decide how to articulate this. Okay, so I'm going to go 4 key functions guiding the business. So this is actually a good question. That's why I'm going to answer it now. So if you've put in a process for time management, say, and then you go to our library and you see a process for time management, and I'm just going to delete this one so that it appears in the library again. And I see this quite often, so that's why it's another good idea. If you've listed your process and you've created a process for time management, you know, you create one for performance review, and you started to document that process, and then you're like, oh, I wonder what's in their library related to that. And you go add from process library, and then you see a process in here for time management, and you're like, wow, I wonder what theirs is. So you fill in the title next to it, and then you add it to your system. Well, now in a sense, you have a duplicate process. You've got 2 processes for time management. You have your own, and then you have the one you added from the library. And I see people have done this, and I think what most of the time they're doing is they're documenting their own, and then they just leave this one. So instead of doing it that way, what you want to do is click the library process and go and look at it. And decide if there's anything in this that you want. So let's say you want to keep this time log, like you really like this and yours doesn't have it. Or you want to keep this prioritizing and planning tasks and yours doesn't have it. You can take this tool out of the library process and move it into your process. So empty this library process of the things that you like from it, move those into your process, and then delete this process. So to move things, you just hit this little star icon, hit the drop down here, find your process. So there's your process, and then just hit save. So now TouchStone has taken that time log out of this process and moved it into your process, or the one that you want to keep. So pull those library processes apart. Take what you want from them, and then delete them. All right, so this is, I just flipped to a whole different TouchStone account here. I know I did that kind of quickly, but we're now in what's called our staging server, and this is the new release of TouchStone. The dashboard is the same. You're not going to see any changed functionality in the dashboard. This left-hand navigation is the same. One of the things that's different, that will be different on the left-hand navigation, is if you're not an administrator, you're not going to see the 4 key functions. So if you're a create user, you're an edit user, or a read-only user, you're not going to be able to go to the 4 key functions. And we did that to help simplify it for those types of users. There's no reason for them to be in the 4 key functions. So you will see the organization chart. So I'm going to click on org chart. And this is what the new org chart looks like. It has some expanded functionality. You can do this little zoom thing. So I'm just zooming way far away and then way up. If you have a massive organization chart, this can be helpful. At some point, no fault of our own, you're not going to be able to see the titles here. But depending on your size of screen, you'll see it bigger or smaller. So I can expand it in and out. I can drag it around, so you can do this functionality in the current org chart view. I can collapse departments if I want to. I'm just clicking this little X here. So where you're in the org chart, if you just want to print or see the higher level or one department or one position, and then I can expand it back out like this. I think this is probably mostly for printing if someone wants to print just one department. You can search your org chart right here. So you can search for positions. If you have a 100-person org chart, you can just type in the title of the position you're looking for, and TouchStone highlights it. You can move positions around the same way. So this is all drag and drop, just the way it was before. To edit the position or to add positions or delete positions, you just click this little 3 buttons right here, and then this edit window comes up. So I can edit the titles right here, I can add a new position, or I could remove a position. So all the functionality is the same, it's just organized a little differently with this new user interface. What this new org chart design has given us too is the ability to add more things to it as we go forward. So things that you're going to be seeing in the early part of next year are going to be the ability to change the colors here on the organization chart. We have this kind of clean look with just the blue line for now, but you'll be able to make them a solid color or change the blue line eventually, and I'm not going to promise when this will happen, but with this new user interface, we're going to be able to put pictures, people's faces in the org chart if you want to add a picture of the person who actually fills that position. So this is a new organization chart. The job description page has been updated. So this is, I just click the box like you do in the current version, and you see it's got more of this kind of sleek and better design. All this functionality is the same though. The drag and drop from up and down is, remove is this little red button. Add existing process, exactly the same as it works now. Add new process. Send print, so this is the printing of the job descriptions or the operating manual. You edit the title just by clicking this little edit pencil, and this opens to edit. And then objective, the same thing. I click here and it opens to edit. So all the same functionality, it just has this little slicker look and feel to it. The print also looks better with this. So now when you print the current version of job descriptions, sometimes the titles get a little smooshed together, but now this has created more succinct fields so if and when you want to print. When I go to the 4 key functions here, I see guiding, getting, doing, running. So you'll see this in the navigation just like you do now. But when I go to one of these functions, then it has this better kind of same design, look and feel idea. So the user interface is what this is called, and we've expanded that user interface throughout these 3 tools, org chart, 4 functions, and job descriptions. The process tools are still going to look like this. And this is the next thing we'll be tackling with the user interface. So with the new user interface will come expanded functionality. So for example, in uploaded files, this is going to be drag and drop. So you don't have to upload the file, you just drag it. Videos will be drag and drop. So this is coming next, just highlighting what you'll see in the upcoming releases. But here in the 4 functions, the sub-functions are now top to bottom. So if I scroll down, I see all the sub-functions. You can also expand and collapse. So if I do this, now I'm seeing all my sub-functions just as a clear list. And then I can open up just one of them and see the processes within it. This is all still, this is drag and drop like it exists now, but it's up and down. It's not going to be left to right. Reordering of the sub-functions is easier too, because I can just pull them up and down like that rather than having to go to that reorder arrow. These appear like folders now, so I can click back and forth between the 4 key functions just by click, click, and then I see it kind of with these lines that show me I'm in this folder or function. And if I look over to the left here, you can also navigate from here between the 4 key functions. And I see I'm on getting because it's highlighted here. I also see it here because it's in this area of the folder. This is edit function title. So if you want to edit the getting, doing, guiding, running, this is the tab for that. And it just pulls up the function title for you to change. Everything related to subfunctions, same as it is now in TouchStone. I can create a subfunction, I can edit, or I can delete. Everything related to processes is here. So here I can create a new process, or I can delete a process. I like the delete a process way better, because when I choose delete, now I'm hitting this drop down and I see everything in alphabetical order that's inside of this function, getting the business, and I can choose it in alphabetical order and hit delete. So there's no kind of dragging it to that deleted folder like it exists now. And then here's the libraries. So when I hit a drop down here, this is the general process library, and then I can add from the libraries just like you do now. So that's kind of a whirlwind into the TouchStone new release, which again you're going to be seeing over the weekend or at the end of or at the beginning of next week. There'll be an email that goes out and letting you know that when it's going to happen exactly, but it's going to be very soon. I think a lot of people are excited about it. In the Resource Center here, the Resource Center, when you get the new release, is going to be completely updated with all of the new screenshots and anything related and everything related to the functionality. I think you'll find that mostly the functionality is the same. It's not going to be a big learning curve for people. The titles are the same. You're just going to find new and better ways of using the functionality. So I've got a list of questions that I haven't answered yet, but I'm going to email people directly about those. And then anything that I think is interesting next week when we start, I'll bring up that question and tell people, because sometimes when a good question is asked, other people have that question. Next week, we'll definitely have the new release, and so you'll see the technical training in the new version of TouchStone. But next week, we're going to talk about the organization chart, which is this. So I'll go over the functionality again, which is pretty straightforward. And then mostly what we're going to talk about is good organization strategy. So how to build a good organization chart, which then becomes a strategy for your business. In my opinion, it's one of the most useful business strategy tools if you're using it correctly. It's not just a chart that shows your positions that you build in TouchStone. It can really be something that helps you to develop the company, move the company forward, or if you're a manager, develop your department. So that'll all be next week. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.